Israelis went to the polls Tuesday for the fourth time in just 2 years, but they still don't know who their next leader will be. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is once again scrambling to gain enough seats to form a majority coalition in parliament. Mr. Netanyahu is now relying on small special interest parties to put him and his Likud party over the top. Not an easy task. For more on this, I'm joined by CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer in Tel Aviv. Hi, Elizabeth. So for those in our audience who may not be familiar, how does Israel's election system actually work, and why have they had so many elections in the past few years?
Well, it's a parliamentary system, so 120 seats in the parliament. One party or group of parties has to get a majority. The person who is the head of the party with that majority becomes the prime minister. In the past, Benjamin Netanyahu's been able to cobble together a coalition. His own party, Likud, didn't get enough seats to win the majority, but he managed to get enough allies to do it. The trouble is, they are they don't always see eye to eye, and at the slightest hurdle, could be a budget, for example. It was the last time. That coalition splits apart and the government falls. So we're in a situation here where Mr. Netanyahu and his allies have got almost enough to win, and the opposition coalition has got almost enough to win, but neither of them are over the top.
And so, of course, as you know, Mr. Netanyahu delivered a coronavirus vaccine rollout in Israel in record time, immunizing a large proportion of the country's adults and essentially enabling the economy to entirely reopen before Election Day. Why wasn't this enough to outright put him over the top?
That's certainly what his strategists were hoping, but there are a few things to consider. First of all, Mr. Netanyahu is a right-wing politician, and Israel has a significant left of center and also liberal group of voters. They wouldn't vote for him ever. Secondly, before the vaccine rollout, which was very impressive, before it began in January, Mr. Netanyahu was widely considered to have handled the pandemic very badly, which left Israel with one of the highest death rates in the world toward the end of 2020. And finally, he is facing some very serious criminal charges for fraud and bribery, and voters are very much aware of this. He is going back into court in next month. So these allegations against him have damaged his credibility in the eyes of many Israelis.
So, Elizabeth, what is next here? It is by no means a sure thing that Prime Minister Netanyahu will form a majority. I understand there are some pretty interesting alliances being formed. What more can you tell us about what will happen next?
If only I had a crystal ball. You know, I explained to you that there are these two broad coalitions, one around Mr. Netanyahu with, half a dozen seats shy of a majority, and the other one, the center secular left coalition, once again, about half a dozen seats shy of a majority. The amazing thing is the three parties who could deliver the seats to one side or the other, of the three, two of them are Arab parties. So it's extraordinary in Israeli politics that the kingmakers in this election could be Arabs, and in one of those Arab parties is actually a conservative Islamist party. So all eyes on the horse trading and the coalition building that's likely to take place over the next few days. As you mentioned, Israelis have been to the polls 4 times in 2 years because these coalitions are so fragile, and they really don't want to go back to the polls. They're weary. The fact is that if a government can't be formed, if neither side can get a majority, that's exactly where they're headed, back to the ballot boxes in a matter of months.
All right, we'll see what happens there in Israel. Elizabeth Palmer in Tel Aviv, thank you so much for joining us.